They say death is the worst fate that can befall a human soul. But the daughters of Xerxes, the Great, knew better. Behind the towering gates of Persepolis, in chambers draped with silk and drenched in perfume, 3 princesses lived a nightmare dressed as a dream Ametis. Rodugin, Ratasha. Their names have been carefully erased from most historical accounts. And after you hear what happened within those palace walls, you'll understand why. This isn't a story about war or conquest. This is about something far more sinister. Something that makes battlefield death look like mercy. In 486 BCE, when Xerxes ascended to the throne of the most powerful empire on earth, he inherited more than just armies and treasuries. He inherited a system, an ancient machine designed to control, to dominate, to consume the lives of women and call it honor. And his daughters, born into the highest privilege imaginable, would become its most exquisite victims. The Persian Empire stretched from the Indus Valley to the shores of Greece. But within the royal harem of Persepolis, freedom was measured in footsteps. 10 paces to the fountain, 15 to the window overlooking gardens you could see but never touch. 22, the door that would never open for you. This is the story they don't teach in history class. This is the truth hidden behind the grandeur of ancient Persia. Because when you peel back the golden leaf, when you step through the official chronicles, you find something that makes your blood run cold. You find 3 young women who would have given anything for the one thing gold could unbuy, the right to be human instead of property. Picture Persepolis. At its height, massive stone columns reaching toward the sky, carved with winged bulls and immortal guardians. The Apadana Palace, glittering under the desert sun, its walls inlaid with lapis lazuli and gold. But architecture, no matter how breathtaking, is just decorated stone, and stones make excellent prison walls. The royal harem occupied the eastern wing of the palace complex. It was a city within a city, and once you entered, you understood the truth. The most beautiful prisons are still prisons. Ametis was the eldest. Born around 519 BCE, ancient sources describe her as possessing her father's intelligence and her mother's striking features. As a child, she received an education reserved for royalty, learning Old Persian, Elamite, and Aramaic. She studied astronomy, mathematics, poetry, music. She was raised to believe she was special, chosen, blessed. But somewhere around her 12th year, the lessons stopped. The tutors stopped coming. The doors that once opened began to close, one by one, until her entire world existed within walls she could touch from end to end in less than a minute. The transformation wasn't violent. That's what made it so insidious. It happened like nightfall, gradually, until you look up and realize you're standing in darkness. New servants appeared, eunuchs with soft voices and hard eyes, men surgically altered to be trusted with the king's possessions, not people. Possessions. The fortification tablets, discovered in 1933, contain palace logistics, and among entries tracking wine and livestock, you find royal women described with the same bureaucratic efficiency as grain stores. The eunuch system of ancient Persia was perfection in brutality. These weren't just guards. They were a psychological weapon, a constant reminder of what power could do to the human body. The procedure was performed on boys between 8 and 12, usually captured from conquered territories. Complete castration using crude tools and cauterization with hot oil. The survival rate was maybe 50%. Those who lived were trained, conditioned, broken, and rebuilt into loyal instruments of the crown. Why use eunuchs to guard women? The official reason was purity, guaranteeing royal bloodlines wouldn't be contaminated. But the real reason ran deeper. Eunuchs represented the ultimate exercise of power, living proof that the empire could take anything, including your manhood, and you would still serve. They were chosen to remind royal women every single day that resistance was futile. If the empire could do this to men, imagine what it could do to you. Ametis grew up surrounded by these altered men. Her childhood playmates were replaced by silent watchers. Her teachers were dismissed, her movements monitored, her words reported and filed in clay tablets that would survive 3,000 years. She was 15 when marriage proposals began arriving. Kings from vassal states, satraps, high-ranking nobles, all sending envoys with gifts and arguments for why their bloodline should mix with the Achaemenid dynasty. None asked Ametis, what she wanted. None even met her. She was a negotiable asset, a political tool, a means to secure alliances and prevent rebellions. The negotiations were complex and calculated, completely devoid of the bride's input. Ancient diplomatic correspondence reveals the language used in these transactions. One letter fragment discusses the transfer of royal property to secure loyalty from a rebellious city. The princess is mentioned 3 times, always in terms of what she represents, never who she is. Her name appears once. Her preferences, thoughts, desires, 0 times. This was the reality for all royal daughters. Rhodigin, the middle daughter, was born around 515 BCE. Less is documented about her, which itself tells a story. In ancient record-keeping, women appeared when useful, when their marriages created alliances, when their deaths caused problems. Rhodigin's Nirabesine suggests she was kept even more isolated, perhaps considered less valuable, or perhaps she resisted most fiercely. Earning erasure from official chronicles, we know she existed because of royal seals and fragmentary inscriptions. But her life, her personality, deliberately buried under the silence patriarchy uses to erase inconvenient women. The harem system operated with mechanical efficiency. The royal women's quarters were hierarchical. The king's mother held the highest position, then the primary wife. Secondary wives ranked by favor and sons produced, then daughters, concubines, slaves. Each level had its own chambers, servants, and daily rations documented in those bureaucratic tablets. A princess like Rhodigin received generous provisions. Fine food, expensive clothing, jewelry, perfumes, cosmetics. Everything money could buy, except agency. The one thing that mattered was the one thing she could never have. Her days were filled with supervised activities, her nights spent in rooms that grew smaller every year. Let me describe a typical day reconstructed from archaeological evidence and administrative records. You wake not to sunlight, but to servants moving behind screens. You don't choose when to wake. That decision was made by a chief eunuch, following a schedule designed to keep you occupied, distracted, docile. Your clothing is selected for you. Elaborate dresses requiring 3 servants, weighing pounds, restricting movement. Beauty as bondage. Breakfast arrives on golden plates. Dates, pomegranates, finest wheat, bread, honey, wine. You eat alone or with your sisters, if the political situation allows it. Because even family relationships are controlled, sometimes prevented when administrators decide certain connections might lead to uncontrollable alliances. After breakfast, you walk in the harem gardens. But only certain sections, only at certain times. Always accompanied by eunuch guards whose presence transforms a garden walk into supervised prison yard exercise. The rest of your day perfects your value as a marriageable asset. You practice music, but only appropriate songs. You create elaborate embroidery that becomes diplomatic gifts, your uncredited labor becoming tools of state policy. You receive cosmetics instruction, learning to paint your face with white lead and coal, to arrange your hair in complex Persian styles, to move with the gliding grace expected of women whose feet rarely touch the earth. And through it all, you're watched. Every word recorded, every gesture analyzed, every sign of rebellion noted and quietly crushed. This wasn't random cruelty. This was engineered control, refined over centuries, designed to make you complicit in your own imprisonment. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden history. The goal wasn't just to physically confine them, but to mentally internalize those boundaries until the cage existed, not in stone, but in the mind itself. This is what makes it worse than death. Death, at least, allows for dignity. This system, however, killed dignity first and let the body live on. Takeratasa, the youngest daughter, born around 509 BCE. By the time she was a teenager, her father's empire was already showing cracks. The disastrous Greek campaigns, the stunning defeat at Salamis in 480 BCE, and the slow erosion of Persian prestige created a paranoid atmosphere in the palace. When empires feel threatened, they tighten their grip on what they can control. And for centuries, empires have found it easiest to control women. Ratasha came of age just as the harem became even more restricted when security was intensified. and when her already narrow world shrank even further. Greek historians wrote about the Persian harem with a mix of fascination and horror. Now, their accounts are problematic. They were written by enemies, filled with biases and errors, but even if we account for exaggeration, certain consistent themes emerge. The king's absolute power over his own family, royal women being used as political instruments, elaborate security, and profound psychological isolation. One disturbing passage even describes how royal women could be executed on the king's order without a trial, without an explanation, or without even being told what they did wrong. Their very lives were entirely dependent on one man's whim. The architecture itself was a tool of control. Excavations at Persepolis revealed the layout of the residential quarters. High walls, limited entrances, narrow corridors with strategic guard posts, and windows placed high and small. Sure, the chambers themselves were comfortable, with advanced ventilation systems and elaborate decorations. But comfort and imprisonment aren't opposites. Sometimes they're partners, because comfortable prisoners are far less likely to revolt. Just think about the psychological state of a young woman growing up in this environment. From birth, you're told you're special, chosen, blessed. You're given the best education, the finest silks and jewels, and told you're a daughter of the King of Kings. Then, right as you're starting to develop your own identity and capacity for independent thought, all of that potential is systematically shut down. You are transformed from a person into a function. Your worth is measured by your marriageability, your ability to produce heirs, your usefulness in forming political alliances. Every message you receive tells you that your thoughts don't matter. Your desires are irrelevant, and your purpose is to be beautiful, obedient, and profitable. Some women surely internalized this. They had to. Survival often requires accepting your circumstances, finding meaning within the constraints, and convincing yourself that the cage is actually a sanctuary. Others resisted, but only in small, wish-defying gestures hidden from watchful eyes. A sarcastic comment to a trusted servant, refusing to wear certain clothing, deliberately singing off-key during a ceremony. These tiny rebellions might seem pathetic to us now, but they were acts of profound courage when discovery could mean punishment, isolation, or even death. And a few, it seems, chose the ultimate rebellion. They chose actual death over the living death of the harem. There is a story in the historical work Persica by Ctesias about one of Xerxes' daughters who attempted to escape. The details are murky, possibly embellished by Greek propagandists. But whether it's literally true or not, it reveals a deeper reality. According to the account, an unnamed princess bribed a eunuch god with jewelry to help her leave the palace, disguised as a servant. The plan was discovered. The eunuch was impaled, left to die slowly over several days. The princess simply vanished. There was no death record, no funeral, no mention in the dynastic history. She was simply erased. This is the ultimate form of control. The power not just to kill, but to erase. To remove someone so completely from history that future generations won't even know they existed. So, how many daughters did Xerxes really have? We know of 3, for sure. Possibly 4 or 5. But the harem contained hundreds of women, and the king had access to all of them. How many children were born and never acknowledged? How many daughters lived and died without their names being recorded, without anyone caring enough to preserve their memory? This silence isn't just an absence of information. It's an act of active suppression. It's the sound of institutional power deciding who matters enough to be remembered. The Persian Empire, for all its magnificence, administrative sophistication, and cultural achievements, was built on the foundation of absolute monarchical power. And absolute power demands absolute control over even the most intimate aspects of life. The harem system wasn't some strange anomaly. It was central to how the empire functioned. It was a microcosm of the larger imperial structure. Just as the empire controlled conquered peoples, extracted their resources, and demanded their obedience, so too did it control royal women, extracting their reproductive capacity and demanding their submission. And just as the empire used a combination of luxury and force to maintain control over its provinces, it used material comfort and psychological imprisonment to maintain control over the harem. By the time Xerxes was assassinated in 465 BCE, murdered by his own vizier, His daughters had spent their entire lives in various stages of this confinement. Some were married off to distant nobles, transferred from one golden cage to another. Others remained in the palace, growing old in the same rooms where they'd played as girls. Watching younger women arrive, watching the same cycle repeat endlessly. So what happened to Amethyst Rodriguin and Ratasha specifically? For the most part, we don't know, and that not knowing is itself part of the horror. They disappear from the historical record. This could mean they died, or they were married and absorbed into their husbands' identities, or they were deliberately erased for reasons we will never understand. Their voices are gone. Their perspectives are gone. Everything we know about them comes from administrative records that list them like inventory, or from Greek historians viewing them through a lens of cultural bias, or from archaeological evidence that shows us the spaces they inhabited but not the thoughts they thought or the emotions they felt. But we can infer. We can look at the system and understand what it does to the human beings trapped inside it. We can recognize the psychological damage of being raised as a person and then treated as property. We can imagine the despair of having intelligence with no opportunity, creativity with no outlet, desire with no possibility of fulfillment. This wasn't physical torture, though that certainly existed for those who truly defied the king. This was something more insidious. The slow suffocation of the self. The gradual, dawning understanding that your life would never truly be your own. That every major decision had already been made by others, and that the beautiful rooms and expensive clothing were merely decorations on a cage. So why does this matter now? Nearly 2,500 years later. Because the mechanisms of control haven't disappeared. They've evolved, become more subtle, and adapted to new environments, but the core principle remains. Systems of power often maintain themselves by controlling the vulnerable, by transforming people into functions, and by making oppression so comfortable that any resistance seems ungrateful. The Persian harem is gone, but its logic persists in different forms. We see it in cultures that treat women as family property, in systems that measure a human's worth by their economic or reproductive value, and in social structures that mistake gilded cages for genuine opportunity. The daughters of Xerxes deserved better. They deserved to continue their education, to use their intelligence, to pursue their interests, and to make decisions about their own lives. They deserved to be the subjects of their own stories, not objects in someone else's political calculations. But they were born into a system that had perfected the art of control, that knew exactly how to break a person's spirit while keeping their body intact. It was a system that understood that the most effective prisons are the ones that make you doubt whether you were really imprisoned at all. When the title of this video says what Xerxes did was worse than death, this is what it means. Not that he personally and actively tortured them, but that he maintained and benefited from a system that systematically denied them their full humanity. He had the power to change things, and he chose not to. He could have educated his daughters and given them roles in governance, as some other ancient cultures did. He could have allowed them choice in marriage, autonomy in their daily lives, and a voice in their own destinies. Instead, he did what powerful men have done throughout history. He controlled them. He kept them beautiful, valuable, and powerless. Their names are Amethyst, Rodriguin, and Ratasha. 3 women who lived over 2,000 years ago in the most powerful empire on earth, who had everything except the one thing that makes life worth living: freedom. We should remember them not as frozen victims, but as complex human beings who deserved better. They represent countless other women who have been erased from the records and from memory, whose stories demand to be told, even when the evidence is fragmentary and the truth is uncomfortable. Because remembering is the first step toward ensuring these patterns don't repeat. Thanks for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the hidden corners of history.